Hello, welcome, and thank you for joining us today for our first AI Masterclass. My name is Juanita Olguin. I am Senior Director of Product Marketing here at Coveo, and today I'm so excited to be with our special guest, Zach Cass, who is an AI futurist and former go-to-market lead at OpenAI. I can confirm Zach was one of our most popular speakers at our Relevance 360 event just a few weeks ago. So we're really excited to hear a bit more from Zach to dive a little bit deeper on what he's hearing, not only from enterprise business leaders, but also board members who are actively having these AI and generative AI discussions. We do want to make sure we get to as many questions as possible. So Zach, why don't we just go ahead and jump right in?
Sounds good. Thanks so much, Juanita. Okay, we're going to talk about applied AI for thinkers today. And I'll start by saying that there is so much happening on the science side right now that it can and often does feel impossible to know where to pin the tail on this donkey. And my position has been and continues to be that the sooner you adopt, the better, but assume that the market will change just as fast as you make decisions. And so as much as I can today, I will help you not with tactical next steps, but with thoughtful strategy so that you can start to think about ways to bring this technology into your business without feeling like everything you do is going to be obsolete tomorrow. So first, let's just start by agenda. I think we need to talk about how we got here because it's the best way that I will help you understand where we're going and how these things should be applied to your business. And so first, and I think crucially, we should talk about the four things that led us to this moment in this acceleration of AI. And the first and the most important is the invention of the modern transformer. In 2017, 8 Google researchers, now known as the Transformer 8, wrote a paper which is called Attention is All You Need. And I talk about this a lot because I think it's actually lost on people what got us to this moment. More and more people understand this now, and that's great because it will help us better understand where we're going next. The debate you're going to start to hear more and more is the transformer architecture the architecture of the future? That has actually started to creep up in the zeitgeist, which is, does the transformer get us to AGI, artificial general intelligence, or is it a new architecture that maybe is more cost efficient, less GPU intensive, etc.? The second thing that happened was an explosion in the amount of available compute. So between NVIDIA's breakthroughs on the GPU, but also this zero interest rate environment, we had companies like OpenAI able to raise what was previously considered sovereign nation amounts of money and put it all towards compute power. And we saw this sort of happen across the board, where what we used to consider would require an Oppenheimer style project now actually is becoming much more tenable for private companies because of these factors. The third is this explosion in the amount of available compute. Between 2010 and 2024, the internet grew 4 orders of magnitude. That's a lot. It also got a lot cleaner. So projects like Common Crawl, which organize the internet's information and make it accessible to researchers, became really rich treasure troves. Now, if you combine these 3 factors with a crucial element, which is publishing, and then you see companies like this share their best practices, what you have is this perfect storm of events that leads us to these outcomes. On the left is large language model performance measured by precision, which is just a science measurement, and LLM size measured by billions of parameters. And between 2015 and 2021, these models got a lot better by the measure of precision, but really by any measure, certainly our eyes test. They also got a lot bigger. So they went from, a couple hundred million parameters to 100 billion parameters pretty fast. Well, then they did it again. This superlinear curve persisted. In 2021 to 2023, precision grew again, almost by an order of magnitude, a little less, and LLM size also jumped from 100 billion parameters to almost now we know over 1 trillion parameters. And this is incredible. What's particularly fascinating about all this right now, what we are observing is that LLM performance is not asymptoting anytime soon. This certainly seems like a world that we are going to continue to observe as a hockey stick. but LLM size may. And the reason we think this is because of this. And this is the slide that gets me most excited as I talk about the application of this technology. And this is the thing that you all should be paying attention to, which is that as we see the new frontier models come out, we also see the older models get much smaller and less expensive. GPT-3 was $10 per million tokens when it arrived. Today, it's less than 10 cents per million tokens. GPT 3.5, $20, a little less. Today, it's less than 35 cents per million tokens. 4 was $60. Today, it's less than 32. This is an incredible trend. And if there's one thing that you take away from this, it should be that the models are getting a lot better. The frontier models are getting a lot better, and the legacy models are getting a lot less expensive. And this, when we see these trends happening in an economic environment where a critical resource declines in price precipitously, it sort of marks this new era. This was true for things like water, obviously electricity. And when you talk about AI as sort of this critical resource, everyone in the world wants to see it decline in price to near free. The thing I think that's going to need to happen, and the reason I bring this up with all of you, those of you who are building systems now, is I think that people and companies are going to need to distinguish between technological thresholds and societal thresholds. A technological threshold is, what can machines do? That's simply the question that technological threshold asks. What can a machine do? And a societal threshold is, what do we want a machine to do? And this is really interesting and important because it's going to be something that you have to ask yourself and your customers a lot. In particular, because the future is about to unfold much faster than the past. And here's how I think this is going to play out. I basically think that we are going to see 3 phases of adoption. And the first phase that we are in right now is what we call the AI enhanced application phase. And the AI enhanced application phase is a really nice phase for us to be in because it comports to the world that we know really well. If you want to use AI, you download an app like ChatGPT, etc., on your phone, you explore the app and you close it, or you open up Gmail and use the autocomplete features. AI sort of exists in the apps that you know, and you don't have to do anything different. This is good because it doesn't actually require a societal update. Phase 2 is autonomous AI agents, and this will require some update because this is going to basically require that we feel comfortable surrendering the work that we do inside of the apps or on the internet to AI. Autonomous agents are coming. Make no mistake, they are proven technically possible at this point. It's just a matter of time. And the easy way to wonder when we will meet the societal thresholds for autonomous agents is actually to consider something like autonomous vehicles. 50,000 people die on the US roadways every year, and yet autonomous vehicles polls at like 15% approval. Why is this? Well, I think there are 2 reasons. The first is we love cars. Americans just love cars. But the second is actually slightly more nuanced, which is society has exceptional tolerance for human failure. We don't mind that much when humans do things that are wrong, which is why we're so willing to let cars crash all the time on our roadways. But we have no tolerance for mechanical failure. And this is a good thing on large part. It's why planes don't fall into the sky. It's why buildings don't fall over. It's why, if your internet goes down for a second, you're on the phone with your provider. What's going on? I need consistent performance. So it's a good thing. The problem is we're going to need to quickly understand what are we willing to start to surrender to machines, because autonomous agents are going to let us not actually use our phones the way we use them today. For example, if I'm in Portland, Maine right now, if I want to fly home tomorrow, there's a lot of work that needs to happen in order to do that. I need to go into United and go into hotels.com and rearrange an Uber and all sorts of things. Autonomous agents are just going to let me say to my phone, hey, I'd like to do this thing. And the rest will happen inside of the apps that already exist on my device. Now, I think this is going to happen really quickly because I think the utility is going to outweigh the uncomfortable cost, but there's going to be a threshold, a place at which we say, you know what, we don't want agents to do that. Which leads me to the third phase, which is going to be the most interesting to observe and witness over the next probably 10, 15 years, which is the AI powered operating system. And if you really want a future plan, I mean, really want a future plan, you could think about this, although I would caution this seems pretty far out right now. I was having a debate with a leader from a former leader from Apple the other day, and we were debating what is the last iPhone we will use. And when there will be a final iPhone, and the over under seems to be iPhone 23 right now. That seems to be a healthy over under, which is to say iPhone will be made for the next 8 years. I'll take the under on that. I think there's a very high likelihood that we start to see the devices move from physical screens with the CPU and the screen is embedded into a more bifurcated world where the screen is more of a wearable and the CPU maybe fits in a small credit card style in our pocket. And the reason that I talk about this is because the AI powered operating system is pretty obviously that future where the AI exists maybe on the CPU and powers everything like the electrical grid or the internet. Which leads me to, I think, my favorite sort of outlook on AI, which is that I think it becomes a utility. And if you really want to plan for AI, think about the ways in which not how you build these enhanced applications necessarily, but how you start to actually embed it into all of the functions that you're doing. And in the same way that today no one would ever say, hey, I have a refrigerator that's electrical, or I have a computer that connects to the internet. These are sort of staples. I think in the future, most of the things that we build will actually be built on an AI powered grid. There are a bunch of products in the market today. And the reason that I don't always show the slide. The reason that I usually show the slide is to say that the consumer market is basically exploding. There are thousands now of products, and A16Z recently published their 100 hot AI-powered consumer products. Of course, these are in the top 10. What is particularly interesting about this is that this market still has very low adoption actually among, for example, the traditional Google or internet user market. A lot of people still have not used these products. And I remind everyone out there that there is still we are still very, very early, and there's incredible amounts of room in the market to build really exceptional products. One of the things that ChatGPT taught me, and it taught me a couple things, but the most important thing it taught me was that the application layer matters. ChatGPT was built 6 months after GPT 3.5 was released in OpenAI's API. It was built on GPT 3.5. There was no major research breakthrough. The breakthrough was in the application. And this is such an important reminder to builders and consumers alike, which is that the application layer matters. These companies are increasingly not differentiated necessarily on the research. The research may actually commoditize. What you get to do is differentiate on the actual buyer experience, the user experience. I got to do a study recently with a major consulting firm. The average improvement in profit margins by companies adopting AI. So there has been so much talk about how this might be a false dawn. And first of all, I'm here to say, as a small business owner myself, it is definitely not a false dawn. I get to do things today that I would not have imagined doing previously because of AI. But simply, we already are observing incredible gains in the actual underlying performances of businesses who are adopting this technology. And this we can observe in a really simple stat, which is the gain in the S&P 500 market cap since the release of GPT-4 is $6 trillion. That's incredible. 500 billion of that obviously goes towards NVIDIA. That's super impressive. But there is a ton of money left for the rest of the S&P 500. And I looked into it. These are fundamental improvements to these companies. And so what we're seeing, it's a marker. It's just a proxy. Not so much that the S&P 500 is going to rip roar and everyone else will suffer. It's that the early adopters of this technology are already gaining massively in their revenue improvements and their profit improvements. And We are going to see incredible efficiency gains going forward by companies who adopt this technology, either through the prosumer apps like ChatGPT, where an entire company gets to use it, or through the APIs themselves. And let's talk about some cases of companies that are building with the APIs and interesting things they're doing. The first is Klarna. Klarna has done some incredible things with AI APIs, and they've published them. And it kind of went under the radar, but it's been pretty fascinating to see what Klarna has been able to do. And there are two things that they have done that are really important. The first is they've automated all of their customer support using AI. And this is impressive considering that Klarna actually has somewhat complex customer support. Buy now, pay later involves a fair number of financial conversations and requires quite a bit of understanding of a product suite. That alone is interesting and massively improves the performance of the stock and of the interest in the company. The other thing Klarna did is they figured out the way that they should be testing their customers' ability to return yields on their loans wasn't exclusively to check their credit score. It was actually to start to explore the purchases that they were making and whether or not they were what they consider luxurious or frivolous. What's really cool is that Klarna is using AI now to build more robust credit score style information around their users that is dramatically improving the yield. So we're not just seeing a decrease in traditional cost structures, we're actually seeing a net new way to run and evaluate a business. Things like this are going to happen all over and just build much, much more interesting companies. Second is Coca-Cola. So Coca-Cola is now doing a number of really interesting things. One, and the one that they sort of made themselves famous for, was they started automating a lot of their marketing by taking a lot of the work that agencies were doing and putting it in-house, giving their designers access to products like Dolly and Midjourney to do a lot of the work that their agencies were previously doing. And if you know anything about Coca-Cola, you know it's at the core a marketing company. They spend about $4 billion a year on it, and about half of that goes outside into the agency world. And so if you can start to, one, empower your own team with the tools that your agency is normally reserved, you obviously will save a lot of money. But two, something else interesting happens, which is you actually start to take more control over your assets. And so they've talked about that. The other thing that Coca-Cola is doing is they're starting to automate the work in the field. So it's one of these consumer packaged goods companies that's doing a whole lot of work to improve the relationship between the salesperson and their buyer. And what people forget often is so much of this is a very human experience. Someone delivers a rack of product to a merchant. That merchant investigates it an hour later and realizes that a bunch of bottles are broken. So they just call their rep back, and then their rep has to call the warehouse, and the warehouse has to figure out how to get new product to them. And it's very arduous. And by the way, these salespeople aren't traditionally good at this exact task. So automating that work that exists between the salesperson of Coca-Cola and their store owner is actually incredibly valuable to both parties. And so we're starting to see processes like this start to automate using chatbots, that the store owner can actually just get immediate insight into the supply chain without going through their sales rep. Morgan Stanley has now sort of made their business case famous, which is really cool. They have Andy Saperstein came to OpenAI in 2021, late 2020. And with a very specific vision, he said, I want my wealth managers to love their jobs more and to be able to serve more customers. That was his vision. And what he was imagining was a world where Morgan Stanley wealth managers didn't do the busy work that actually they weren't inclined to, and they weren't very good at, didn't serve them, and instead focused on the work that made them successful as wealth managers, the relationship management. And what they built was a product that allowed Morgan Stanley wealth managers to basically automate most of the note-taking and follow-up and next step work that didn't accrue value to them and felt more administrative than anything else, and spend most of their time on the high value work. In the end, Morgan Stanley wealth managers are now able to run books 40% bigger than they used to. And this is really cool because it means a couple things. One, they can actually start to charge less. and provide financial goods and services to bigger swaths in the market. That's a very good thing. The second thing that can happen is they can pay their people more or even collect more margins. The best part about this is you actually are just going to start to see worlds where the cost of goods and services decline and every constituent can win. And then this last example is sort of one of these incredible ones if you work at a big company, because Salesforce, Mark Benioff basically said to Claire Shih, you need to help us reinvent Salesforce. And so Claire has gone out and built Salesforce AI and sort of reimagined what Salesforce would look like if it was a startup again, renewed by this sense of magic in AI. And they have built an incredible suite of new products powered by their traditional Salesforce ecosystem that feel really magical. And I bring this case up not because I love Salesforce. I thankfully don't have to use it anymore at this stage of my life. But it is a fascinating moment because it actually, Salesforce, Mark and Clara can finally deliver the magic that they have been promising the market for 20 years, that Salesforce would make salespeople so much more happy and so much more successful. We're finally arriving at a moment where that can be true, where all of these interesting products that they've sort of been taunting, or flaunting to the market can actually now become really, really magical because of AI. This is what I tell every company. This is my single message as sort of a download from these examples, which is that you now have three major competitive advantage. The first is your data. And I don't think your data is a competitive advantage insofar as it will help you fine-tune models. It may. You may need a fine-tuned model, but I think your data is far more interesting as a way to build hyper-personalized experiences. The future is very much vector search and retrieval powered by RAG, wherein you will do a whole lot of work to fine-tune a precise experience and then call a database with all of your data to build these really hyper-personalized experiences. The second is distribution. Distribution will remain one of the hardest things that any company does. And the more things change, the more they stay the same. Sales and marketing are just critical. You can build the world's best product. Doesn't matter if no one buys it. Focus on figuring out how you can streamline your distribution, ideally powered by AI. The third is brand trust. In a world where everyone starts to provide exceptional experiences, what will set some brands apart from others, I am basically certain is going to be brand trust. And this is going to be true at an individual level where all of our skills and commodities will eventually, all of our skills and knowledge will eventually commoditize. And the likelihood is we will be differentiated on a personal trust basis. What does our brand say to other people? And at a corporate level, I think offers that companies provide will start to look equally amazing because of AI. And why will one person pick one particular vendor over another? I think it's going to be because of the quality of the brand. I'm so glad that we were able to spend this time together. I won't keep us much longer, and I'm really excited to open up the floor to you all for Q&A.
Thank you, Zach. That was incredible. Lots of great insights. We do have a few questions coming in, so I'll get to those in just a moment. Do want to say, really love your three phases of thinking. I also love you proposing that machines can do a lot. So what do we want them to do? With that, let me start getting to some of these questions. The first has to do with the ethics of AI. And the question is, are the leaders that you are meeting with asking about the balance between ethics and innovation?
Yeah, I think a lot of people ask about ethics. I'm pretty, I want to separate this idea of ethics from responsibility. There are a lot of laws in this world, especially in the Western world, in the United States, that protect consumers and businesses from each other. And we should enforce those laws. The thing that we should be really concerned about right now with respect to responsible adoption of AI and responsible manufacturing of AI are three things. One is alignment. Is the model concerned with the human experience? Is it imbued with human values? That's what the alignment problem asks. And that's a thing that should be policied at an international level by an international body, in my opinion. The second is explainability. Can a model explain how it made a decision? models we should assume will have bias. Everything does. But what separates AI from humans is that it's exceptionally capable, or should be, at explaining itself. How did it arrive at a decision so we can at least account for it? Policy things will be really critical. The third is bad actors using AI. We should make it untenable, terrifying for bad actors to use AI in bad ways. And from an ethical standpoint, these are the things that I focus on, because most everything else in this world is protected in an appropriate way already by law. There are things that companies should and shouldn't do, et cetera, that already have sort of been adjudicated for hundreds of years since a post-industrial society. And I don't know that companies need to sort of re-litigate or re-explore these things.
Amazing. Thank you for that. Um, Moving over to your conversation around AI becoming a bit of a utility, we have a question here asking, how do you think the UX of enterprise search might change, given the utility? And you also mentioned application layers becoming important.
Yeah, I mean, Coveo knows this well. The future of search is not the one that we're used to. I think Google has sort of exhausted all of our patience with, maybe I shouldn't say this. Well, I think it has. Google has exhausted their patience with traditional keyword search. No one wants it anymore. It's just not how the world works. We also don't want to sell our personal information to the highest bidder anymore. These are sort of relics of a bygone sort of Web 1.5 era. The question is, what replaces it? I think enterprise search is the first thing to sort of watershed to mark this new moment. And the very high likelihood is everything becomes natural language, that we will build vector databases that store all of our information, and we will retrieve that information through very natural language queries like, can you show me all the contracts expiring tomorrow? Can you tell me how our performance was last month? What does EBITDA look like if we took out taxes? Interesting questions that normally require exceptional amounts of heavy lifting and analysis. That, I think, will also then trickle into how the consumer world changes. And the reason that consumer search is going to take a while to change is because Google has a lot of vested interest in making sure that it doesn't, or at least it doesn't quickly. And so I think enterprise search and Coveo get to sort of signal this new era of natural language living.
Absolutely. Along those same lines, Zach, there's a question here around how important it is to customize your Gen AI implementation with your specific enterprise-wide knowledge. Can you comment on how important that might be? And
Yeah, so I think we should separate. I think we should separate. Well, customizing an experience versus fine tuning a model. Increasingly, there are going to be reasons to fine tune models. The customization of an experience, I think that the effort that should be put into building a custom experience should be around the actual application layer itself, because that's probably where the differentiation is going to come. The big thing, the major consideration that every business needs to ask themselves before they start building their own experience is, should our vendors be doing this? And if you are designing a system or a solution and you find yourself wondering if a vendor should be doing it, you are almost certainly right. There is very little that most enterprises should actually build on their own, because so much of their tech stack is actually going to be solved by vendors. And a lot of this work is just going to feel obsolete in 3 or 6 months anyways. So my strong recommendation to most companies is put pressure on your vendors to build future-proof applications so that you aren't sort of left trying to piecemeal a bunch of systems together. And the things that you choose to build should fall under the Venn diagram of is critical, cannot be solved by a vendor, and we are in a unique position to solve it. And if you can sort of build for that, then or is solvable by AI, I suppose is the easier way to put it. If you can run that Venn diagram, then you will figure out exactly what you should be designing.
that makes a lot of sense. Wanted to ask, You mentioned you meet with and you talk to a lot of enterprise leaders and even board members. Do you think, or are you hearing them talk more LLMs and building, or are they also talking about, partnering to build those best-in-class user experiences?
Yeah, I think everyone is trying to figure out what should they build versus what should they buy. And my recommendation is constantly to buy first or try to buy first. Building has just a lot of costs, a lot of hidden costs. And I think it's one of these fool's errands where you can, throw as much as you want at a problem. But if it's a general problem in the market, it'll probably get solved more effectively than you can solve it because someone's going to focus exclusively on it. So, most companies are considering building a very limited set of things, and those things are very critical to their business, and they don't think it's things that their vendors can support them with.
Awesome. Thank you. Much has been talked about or said, obviously, with Gen AI and the technology side. Are you hearing about the talent side, upskilling workers, anything you can share there?
Yeah, well, I have my own opinions on it, and I'm hearing some things. So I get to do a fair amount of research, and I am an executive in residence at UVA, which is a fancy title for someone who gets to teach a class and hang out on campus with the McIntyre undergrads. And so I get to see a little bit about how AI is changing their jobs and how it's changing their learning. And I have two observations. The first is that pinning, again, this is a pin the tail in the donkey situation. Trying to identify the skills that someone will need to upskill to in the future is going to be a fool's errand. It's just impossible. What is possible is basically recognizing and admitting that the only thing we know is that adaptability is going to be critical. Teaching young people how to learn for the sake of learning is going to become more important than any skill that they actually acquire. And we, kind of already observed this, which is like a lot of lawyers who are graduating today can probably tell that they're not going to practice law forever. And, but that doesn't mean they shouldn't have studied law. Studying law is interesting insofar as it taught them how to become really capable and smart on a subject. In the same way that someone who learned the cello at a master level, may not play the cello forever, and quite honestly, maybe burnt out by it, but in fact, learned how to do something at an expert level and knows what that feels like. So increasingly, my message to students and young people is study things rigorously, not because that thing is going to gain you some economic competitive advantage. It probably won't, insofar as a lot of our skills and knowledge will just commoditize. But it will teach you how to learn and ensure that you are sort of future proofed, robust to things that change. And by the same token, I tell employers think about hiring for soft skills and people who learn how to learn. I don't think that the future is made up of geniuses who struggle in teams. Reed Hastings had that fun quote. Netflix had the no assholes policy, I think in like 2007 or 8. And what was interesting about that quote is not that they had a no asshole policy, it's that he had to say it. It's that so many people were hiring brilliant jerks at the time. And I think that era is just definitely over. We are going to observe a world where AI ends up doing a lot of the computationally intensive work, and what we are left with is things like teamwork. How courageous are you? How curious are you? How empathetic are you? How well do you collaborate and communicate? And so my strong encouragement to employers is, again, to hire for these soft skills and hire for people who have learned how to learn.
I think that's great. I love your perspective. We call those soft skills or emotional intelligence as well. So totally agree with you on that one. We have time for just one more question, so I'll throw that to you, Zach. The question really is, you talked a bit about brand trust. You talked a little bit about, LLMs being commoditized and, AI becoming a utility. How can companies tell these vendors apart, or how can they tell quality, how can you see quality companies over those that are maybe just stitching together a solution? Any advice you can give them?
Well, This is this is going to be really hard. I think a lot of people are going to buy snake oil. I think a lot of people already have, and a lot of people will. I don't think that companies that sell snake oil are going to sell it for very long. So this is sort of why this is why I talk about brand trust. I think that we are going to discover really quickly that vaporware in this world doesn't work. People are going to realize that there's a big gap between a vendor that actually is embedded GPT-4 into their workflow versus an vendor that, is just still sort of dabbling with it. Um, I think world will get out in the marketplace really quickly. I think people will discover that information is becoming far more perfect and is shared more frequently. I think there's going to be huge consolidation in the private markets, especially in technology, between companies that adopt this really quickly and companies that are just saying they're adopting it. And so my advice to every buyer out there is put pressure in your procurement process. Actually, trial products if you can. Demos are all going to look super flashy now. Everyone's going to have a flashy demo. Make sure that you're trialing products. Make sure you're putting pressure on vendors to actually build these magical experiences, because there's basically no longer an excuse for why they can't.
Makes sense. Thanks so much. All right, we are at time. Really appreciate all of your insights, Zach. Thank you for spending this time with us today. For those of you whose questions we could not get to, don't worry, we'll be following up with you offline. We hope you enjoyed this time with us today. We have more sessions like this to come with AI experts like Zach, who you can learn from and hear from over time. Stay tuned for the recording. We'll get you full access. Zach, want to thank you for the time again. Have a nice day.
Thanks, Juanita.
Yes.
You too.
Bye.